Welcome to the Melanin Jelly Project Conversations, a podcast that celebrates diversity and representation in children's storytelling, entertainment, and edutainment. I am the host, Olunosen Louisa Ivaze. On this podcast, I chat with authors and creators of children's books, entertainment, and edutainment. This is also a collaboration with the Ottawa Black Book Club. So welcome Dr. Jomo W. Mutegi, author of DAFFY Dog DIVA of Dingledorf Drive. Welcome to the Melanin Jelly Project Conversations podcast. My name is Olunosen Louisa Ivaze. I put together this podcast because I realized that we don't have enough podcasts that celebrate diversity and representation in children's storytelling. So kindly tell me about yourself and what inspired you to write this book, because today I had interviewed someone who had a dog story, but this is an unusual dog story.
Yes.
So tell me about yourself and what inspired you to write this book.
Sure. So just a little background on myself. I'm actually a university professor is my main profession.
Okay.
And some years ago, 2011, I published a paper which lays out a way that we could approach curriculum for Black learners that would make science education more meaningful for us.
Okay.
Many people as adults, they don't really gravitate much towards science. Their experience in school science has not been very beneficial. Mm-hmm. And so as we progress through life, we have situations where we need science background knowledge, but what we've gotten in school is not really the best. It's not the most helpful for us. Okay. And that's especially true for us as African people. And so the model was really describing what we needed in our science instruction. Okay. When I wrote that, it was well received by researchers. I had a difficult time getting teachers to use it and implement it in their instruction. And I thought that embedding it into stories would make it more accessible, and teachers would have a way to use it in their instruction. That's how I got started writing the children's books. Okay. And so this book in particular, what precipitated it was I had a neighbor who didn't like the way I care for my dogs. And when I was in Indiana, I was living on a large parcel of land. We had 10 acres. And in the country, your dogs just I call them community dogs. So it's almost like a symbiotic relationship. The agreement is that I'll provide some food, you kind of live here and do your thing. And that's how many people in that area were. So dogs they weren't bound by our boundaries. They would cross property lines, play with each other. At night, they'd always come back. And that was their home place, but that's just how they lived. So when I moved into the city, my dogs were outdoor dogs and they had a lot more freedom. And so that incident helped me to see the different lenses we bring to human beings' relationship with animals. And so this story really is for teachers and for parents, helps them to give children the groundwork for understanding that relationship, but in a way that they could understand if they're 4, 5, 6, 7 years old. Okay. Later in life, where this becomes important is when human beings start thinking about, okay, what kind of food am I going to eat? Some people are vegan or vegetarian because they don't like the way animals are treated when they're being reared in CAFOs. Mm-hmm. Where we warehouse chickens and pigs in close proximity. Okay. Some people don't wear fur because they don't believe in how animals are treated to process the fur. Okay. Whatever your perspective is, as an educator, I want it to be an informed perspective. Mm-hmm. So I think that as children, we want to give them the foundational ideas that they need to be able to think through these social issues as they get older. That's really the foundation for this book in particular.
Oh, okay. So DAFFY Dog DIVA. So in regards to dogs, as a Nigerian, our dog relationship is very different from. I don't have an issue with pets. I grew up with pets because my dad was in the police force. So I'm used to functional dogs. I like really big dogs. So if I have a dog here, I want the dog to bark. I need everybody around here to know there's a dog. So don't come. Right. So as Africans, as Nigerians, those are the kind of dogs that we have. Guard dogs. So
right.
we don't have a culture of letting dogs into the house.
Yes, right.
So when you spoke about dogs running around, on the acres, they call them feral dogs, but in Nigeria our dogs were like that. They
Yes.
would go out to play, run around, then they'll come back. But as we moved into the city, our houses are fenced, so your dogs have to stay in the compound.
Yes.
Yeah. So I don't have an issue with pets, but I think the issue I have with pets, with pet owners, is their inability to contain their pets.
Yeah, that's, you raise a very interesting issue, and that is one that we don't really question. The way our schooling is set up, we don't put these type of issues on the table many times. We just operate on assumptions. And so if you operate on the Western assumption, people in this society treat their animals like they're little children. Yeah. And we take that as a norm. Just to share a story, when the property I mentioned to you, when I first moved there, the dogs weren't mine. They were there. They lived there longer than I did. The previous owner said to me, the dogs are here. They've lived here all their lives. Would you mind letting them stay and you just feed them? I said, that's no problem. That was what the previous owner told me. So when my son and I went to a pet store to get some food, we didn't know what kind of food to get. The man in the store started asking us about the dogs. Okay. And he asked where they stay. He said, well, they stay outside. They have areas of the property where they live, And he said to us, they'd be much happier if they were in the house. Now, right. So, I said, okay, kept it moving. But later on, I looked at my son, I said, that's interesting. He knows how happy these dogs would be. He never spoke to them a day in his life. He never met them. But what he's operating on some assumptions that what life is comfortable for humans is also comfortable for animals. And in Western society, Westerners treat their dogs the same way they would treat their children. They let them sleep in their bed, they kiss them in the mouth. But in many other cultures, probably most other cultures, that's not the relationship that humans have with domestic animals. And so your experience in Nigeria is very much like many African Americans' experience was here years ago. We're getting more and more acclimated to the way the mainstream does things. But that's one thing I like about this book is it doesn't give an answer. It just puts the issues on the table for parents to raise with their children and for children to think about, so that as they go through life, they don't operate on unquestioned assumptions, but they've actually thought through some of the issues.
Okay. So what I like about this one, because when I started it, I had to read the book twice. I went back, I read it twice because I needed to understand. Because I was thinking, okay, Dog Diva, the dogs didn't really do anything to her. The dogs were just, like we say in Nigeria, the dog was just on its own, living in peace, existing in peace. And the irony was she had pets too.
Yes.
So why did she feel the need to ensure that other dogs were taken away and her own dogs? Because her dogs don't look happy. They don't look happy. Yes. So because as much as I'm not big on having dogs in the house, but I wouldn't do things to get people's pets taken away, because I know what pets mean to people. People use pets for therapy, and I love that we have service animals.
Yes.
Yeah. So how important do you think it is for children to read stories about human and pet relationships? How important do you think it is for children to read such stories?
I think it's of critical importance. Again, it's one of the things we don't foreground. But if you think about the many spaces in our lives where our relationship with animals is important, and I mentioned earlier the food that we eat, the clothes that we wear. I did mention it, but another area is cosmetics. Okay. So many cosmetics are tested on animals. Animals are used for testing. I don't think I'm in a group, but I was reading some comments in a group on raising rabbits. And one of the commenters mentioned that she couldn't eat a rabbit.
Okay.
Some of the others raise rabbits for meat. Well, okay, that's a good question. So what is it about a rabbit that makes it such that you wouldn't eat it, but you eat a chicken? Is the rabbit's life worth more than a chicken's life?
Okay.
You know, is the rabbit's life worth more than a cow's life? Because we sure sit down to a hamburger, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so these are instances in which we have to make decisions. And if we want our children to be thoughtful, and if we want our community to have some degree of autonomy, that's something I haven't gotten into. I'll get to that in a minute if you'd like.
Sure.
But if we want to have some degree of autonomy as African people, we really have to think through and have a firm understanding of where we stand on issues like this. And there are many socio-scientific issues, but human relationships with animals is one, and it's one that cuts across many areas of our lives.
Okay. Yeah, because I know that dogs are the only animals that have successfully been domesticated for thousands of years. Dogs and maybe cats. Yeah, because I see people sometimes try to domesticate wild animals, like they keep lions as pets. So one I read was a man who had found a baby hippo. He took care of this hippo, and years later he found the hippo. He came back and started to take care of the hippo as an adult. And one day the hippo dragged him into the water and killed him. Yeah, because they say, look, you can. I mean, these are wild animals, and yeah, it's like when I see people with orcas, I go, they are not called killer whales for nothing.
Yeah.
Like when I hear that, today, I think it was Tilikum, before Tilikum passed, I think it killed, three people? And I went, but it's a killer whale. It's not a pet.
Yes.
It should be in the ocean. But
yes.
Yeah, but like for dogs, they have successfully been domesticated. But I'm still trying to, here, I've not still gotten used to, I went to see someone, she's from the Caribbean. Okay, so she's been here for a while, and she had a dog. And the dog came in and started to bark. Look, if it's my dog, fine. But if it's someone else's dog, as long as it's barking, I keep my distance. Because I was chased by a dog when I was I 10 or 11? And I don't think I ever ran so fast in my life. And that was it for me. That was what started the dog fear. And I said to her, please put the dog outside. So she put the dog outside and we started to chat. But she went, oh, it's so cold. I went, but it's a dog, right? She said, no, yeah, it's a dog, but it's part of the family. So she brought the dog back into the house, and then she put the dog on the couch. And I was sitting on that couch, and I said, no, I have to stand up and go sit somewhere else. And she goes, it won't bite you, it just wants to play. But I think it's not, for me, it's just not my experience. I'm just, with children reading about human relationships with pets in books, I think that especially for African parents, it starts to give, because sometimes we have practices, unquestioned practices that we just carry on. We don't know why we do it. So there are practices we meet and we just carry them on.
Yes.
So I think sometimes too, as parents, we transfer these fears to our kids, even without them knowing. So if I don't have dogs in my house, definitely my kids will also assume, okay, mom doesn't have dogs in her house because dogs are scary. But when a child reads this book, a child comes to understand, because now these children are trying to do something about this woman who is ensuring that dogs are being taken away. I love that you brought in the elders. What was the role of the elders? And you call them Baba. What was the role of the elders? I didn't expect that. I didn't expect to see that. So why did you put the elders?
I appreciate that question. So let me just explain too, my personal political social approach. I'm a Pan-Africanist.
Okay.
And everything I do, whether it's in my profession or my personal life, is aimed at helping to position us as African people to reclaim some goodness in our lives.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And so part of that, when you read any of the books that the Black kids read books that I write, you'll always see Black protagonists. You will always see whole, intact Black families. And so here, there's not a mother and father, but there are children who are clean. They're clean, they're well dressed, they're well presented. They are obviously cared for. They're elders who they have respect for. So this is part of the ethos that that for us as a race of people has been occurring throughout time. And in some pockets we're losing it, but my effort is to help us to maintain affinity, to keep it in mind that this is who we are as a people and it's important for us. I'm just going to digress real quick. So I mentioned to you earlier that I was visiting Lagos and Ibadan this past January. And we went to one of the villages, the village where my friend's family's from, Awe. And as we enter the uncle's home, everyone bows.
Yes, you bow.
Everyone from a 12-year-old to a 50-year-old, you bow to show respect.
Yes.
To the elder of the home, right? And so that just shows how ingrained that idea of respect for elders is in our community. And that's something I had an opportunity to represent in the book. So for our children to see, we do have, I wouldn't say a hierarchy as much as just a culture of respecting each other. And this is one of the ways that we show respect.
Okay, yeah, because I found that this was really good that you brought that in. Yeah, and then here I wanted to ask here, when the children were complaining to the elder about what she does to her dogs, I thought these were good things, aren't they? But the dogs don't look happy. One said she makes her dog wear shirts and pants. They never run and play. They eat kibble out of her hands. They watch TV all day. Then I saw her feet on the dog's back. I thought these are good things for posh dogs. Aren't they good things for posh dogs?
Yeah. So again, and I'm not trying to. My effort wasn't to say that one way is bad or good. Now, in my perspective, I wouldn't do that to dogs. Okay. But I wanted to show the different ways that we do interact with dogs. Okay. And so here, what we really can think about is, and you mentioned your friend who had the dog was in the house, the dog was outside, she brought the dog in the house, the dog was on the couch, the dog wanted to play. Yeah. So what I would ask myself is not, is this what I want for the dog, but what does the dog want for himself or for herself? Right? Really? And so we many times start making judgments about what other creatures, we're talking about dogs now, but this could apply to any creature. I'm just going to digress for a moment. There's a book I had my class read, The Hidden Life of Trees. Okay. And in this book, the author was saying trees don't really do good by themselves. The trees are communal, and there's research which shows that trees communicate. Their roots have to touch one another. When they grow up next to each other, one tree will adjust its branch growth to accommodate the other tree's branch growth. Trees feed each other, right? So there's a real community that we don't look at trees that way, but we're looking from humans' perspective. So when we put a tree out front of our house by itself, that's probably not the way that tree would prefer to live, because that's not how trees are biologically adapted to live. And the same dogs. Does that one dog want to sit in your house all day? That's not really how dogs are taken from animals like wolves, and what's another one? Hyenas. These are different canine type animals that dogs come from, right? Okay. But they live in packs. They live in dens. They're very, very mobile. The wolf is a very mobile animal, so they move, walk, run miles and miles a day. They can't replicate that in a living room.
No, they can't.
And so these are things that I would say we should really think about it. I mean, what really would make the dog happiest if our real concern is the dog's quality of life? So at the end of the day, the dog should live like a dog, not like an animal that's emulating humans. And when you told the story about the hippo dragging that man in the water, Chris Rock has this joke that they said the lion went crazy. He said, no, the lion went lion. He did lion things. That's what lions do.
Yes.
Whales, that's what they do. They kill. They kill a whale. And so one way we could think about it is, how can we live with them, but let them live life the way that they were designed to live, and the way that we were designed to live, and then still have a good, if you will, a good interspecies relationship, which that is possible, right? That is possible. So.
Well, I think that of all the dogs I ever had growing up, the ones that had the best lives were the ones I had as a child. But I feel that those dogs had a good life because they were free to roam about. We lived in the north. So in the northern part of Nigeria, life is easy, slow, open fields and all of that. So the dogs would go out to play and then they would come back at night. And the way the dogs were raised, my mom will always make sure that the dogs did not eat raw meat. They don't eat anything raw. They always cook everything they eat, so much to eat. But by the time we left the north and moved down south, where it was more, a more individualistic kind of society. In the north, we knew our neighbors, we could go out to play. Right. But down south, it was very different. The fences were high and we were just in this large compound. So, but I always had dogs. And now I feel bad that, I used to keep the dogs I had a series of dogs. I would keep them in a cage in the daytime. So keep it in a cage, feed it in the daytime, bring it out at night, because I was told that if I do that, it will make the dog really wild. So that was the goal. And I tried to train the dog to teach it how to sit, but I was never successful at doing that. So now I feel bad that I used to keep the dog in a cage, but I kept it in the cage in the daytime so that when guests come to the house, they are not scared to come into the compound in the daytime.
Right.
Yeah, and then coming here and seeing the way people relate with their dogs, I have never thought of how a dog feels. I've never thought of the feelings of the animals. All I just know is be kind to that animal.
Right.
Yeah, I've never looked at it from the animal's point of view because I'm a work in progress. So how important do you think it is for writers to tell representative stories?
When you say representative, you mean representative of what?
Of anything, because like this, your book now, what I see from your book is pet relationships, people's feelings and people's interest towards their pets. When I talk of diversity and representation in children's storytelling, people I notice are usually thinking about race, race, disabilities, neurodiversity, and all of that. But with the kind of books I received and the kind of authors that reached out to me, I spoke because the first person this is the third interview I'm having today. The first interview was actually a dog lover also.
Okay.
Yeah, so she has no kids, but she had loads of dogs. And I said to her, after the interview, bring in your dogs, let's say hello. And she had these huge dogs, So it's also representative because it's talking about people overlook or people take human and pet relationships for granted, or they don't even just bother about it. So that's why I'm asking you, how important do you think it is for people to tell representative stories, for children to read stories about human and pet relationships, especially kids who have had the fear of dogs transferred to them from their parents?
Yes.
Yeah.
So one of the things I think is beautiful about stories is that it allows us to do two things. On one hand, we can help a reader to connect with experiences that sit deeply within themselves. And so a story is on one hand something that we can readily connect to because I see myself in that story. And you made the point. We often speak of it in terms of race and gender, ethnicity. Yes, those are ways that we can identify, but we can also identify by our ideology being represented or our perspective being represented. Even a challenge that we face being shown that someone is facing a similar type of challenge. So that on one hand, stories give us a point of connection. That's important. We can say that's like the mirror role of stories. But the other that's critically important is where we can let the story be a window into something that children or people, readers, would never see. And I mean, science fiction is the best example. Science fiction stories, on one hand, are about things that we never see because they don't really exist, right? But what they do is they stimulate our imagination, they stimulate our thinking, so we can now imagine what that world is like or what that situation or scenario would be like. And so I think that it's important for stories to have elements of both. In this story in particular, there are some things that I thought that children nowadays, elementary age child today, could readily identify with. And so part of that was the racial representation, the family structure representation, the fact that these are neighborhood kids that are having a dilemma and they're working together. That's something I think that many can really identify with.
Okay.
Now, the way that they address the challenge, I thought that might be more of a window, because you don't often see a group of children going rogue or neighborhood. Doing something to see it, fantasize, but that's pretty interesting. But the reality is that as they grow and get older, we do want our children to become adults who feel comfortable taking matters into their own hand, identifying their problems, and working together to solve their problems.
Yeah.
And so I think that a good story is both a mirror and also a window into a mirror reflecting what you already are and see, but a window help me to envision new possibilities.
Okay. When you mentioned windows and mirrors, we have in children's storytelling, there's what we call window stories and we call mirror stories. Mirror stories is when you open and you see children who look like you. Right. Window stories gives you the opportunity to step into the life and the experiences of other children.
Yes.
Yeah. What challenges do you think authors experience when they try to tell representative stories?
What challenges for who? For any
author? Yes, because let's say I wanted to write a pet story now.
Yes.
So I'm terrified of cats. Yeah, I saw your expression. Yeah, I'm terrified of cats, and my fear of cats, which is crazy, I think it still stemmed around the culture. Mm-hmm. But my grandmother had lots of cats. The irony, she had lots of cats, but her cats were not pets. The cats were brought into the house because, to chase mice.
I say yes.
So they were functional. So when I think of animals, I think of what they can do. I think of their functions. I don't think of them as pets.
Yes.
So if someone like me now was going to write a cat story, what do you think will be some of the challenges? Because someone had said, if you're going to write, one advice I would give you if you're going to write a pet story, write from your experience. But trust me, I don't think any child wants to read my dog experience or my cat experience. I don't think any child wants to.
Yeah,
so challenges, if someone wanted to write a heartfelt pet story, because I saw Hachiko. I saw the movie Hachiko. I don't know if you've heard of that dog. But in Japan, the statue of the dog is still at the Shibuya train station in Japan. Hachiko. I think it's something you should watch. Yes, but the dog. Yeah.
It's a dog that the owner would leave every day for work and come back, and the dog would meet him at the professor.
Yes.
And the dog just kept coming and would always come away. Yeah.
I saw that movie and I cried because I went, I never thought of the loyalty of an animal in that way. Yeah. Yeah. So if I wanted to write a heartfelt pet story, what are some of the challenges you think I will experience, and what tips can you give me to write a good heartfelt pet story?
Yeah. So that's an excellent question, and it raises a couple of really good issues for where we are with Black children's literature, but I'll say Black literature as a whole. So the first thing I would say is, in order to write a story, you have to write it as you were told, from your perspective. Mm-hmm. Okay. If you are someone who doesn't have pets, you're not going to be able to write a story about pet ownership. Okay. It's just not going to work. Too much of the writing process comes from what's within you. Okay. Now, if you're committed to doing it, what I would say is you have to then go out and get that experience. Mm-hmm. And so I'm in the process. I finished a novel back in November, and I'm getting it ready to send out to beta readers. Okay. Well, this story has taken me a few years to write. And there were some experiences that my characters have in the story that I wasn't comfortable writing about. So I went out and got those experiences. That may take me a couple months. Okay. So for example, if I want to write a story about a boxer and I've never boxed, you can't do it. So I'm gonna go box. I might box for 3, 4, 6 months, and I will get in the ring and let somebody beat me. So I know what this feels like. But you can't write about it with any authenticity. We can imagine what it might be like. Oh, it probably hurts, but do we really know what aspect of it is going to hurt? At what point do you want to get hit so that the fight can be over because you're too fatigued? What parts of my body hurt? Does my head hurt when it gets hit, or am I afraid of being hit? Is that what's really at play? Are my arms sore from holding them up? These are all the type of details that make a story rich and meaningful that it's really hard to provide without some level of experience. Okay. Now, I would say, so experience is one way to prepare yourself to do it. Another way to do it, and this is more with fiction or narrative story writing. As a professor, I write a lot about experiences I haven't had, but I'm reporting my research. So I go out, I collect some data, I look at the data, and I go back to the reader and say, hey, here's what the data says. Okay. I don't have to experience a heart attack to report what others have said, but the reporting of it is very different than it would be in a narrative. If I'm writing a story about someone having a heart attack, it's going to be a little bit different than me just saying, here are some similarities of heart attack victims. Okay. If this makes sense to you. But I think that is another valid way of learning. So whether it's interviewing people, making detailed observations, you're getting information in a second-hand way as opposed to the first-hand way. And both are valid. Both will help you to put together that final product. The last thing I wanted to say is that this is one reason why we need Black authors writing Black stories. So some years ago, when I started this actually, and I started reading about it, I found that I think the percentage was 3%, fewer than 3% of children's stories feature Black protagonists or written by Black authors. I'm pretty sure that was the number. But what made it so profound is that there were more stories with animals as main characters than there were Black children as main characters. And so on one hand, the industry has responded a little bit in that they're promoting, I'm not saying that there's a whole lot more Black stories, but they do put more behind promoting books with featuring Black characters. But now if you look at it, many times these stories are not written by Black authors. And so for readers, I would say, if you want an authentic representation of the Black experience, you have to have authors who are Black authors. And I would say this level, at some point, you look at the story and you say, okay, if this story is about topic X, what does this author bring to this story about topic X? And as consumers, we've got to make intelligent decisions. I'm not going to listen to a white author tell me about Blackness. Now, you might have had an experience, maybe visiting a Black country, and you want to share that experience. I can accept that. But you're not going to tell me about how to be Black, and you're not Black. And so I think that that's another reason why that firsthand experience is essential to being able to represent a story well.
Okay. And then I used to have all these classmates, we'd like to go to Africa and do blah, blah, blah. And I go, what country in Africa? Because first of all, Africa is not a country.
Absolutely.
So when you tell me you are going to Africa, I get offended. Because yes. Africa has 54 sovereign countries.
Yes.
So which country are you going to? Because I had interviewed an author, Nana Ekwa Hammond. She's Ghanaian, but born and raised in the US. And we were talking about the challenges of getting published as Black authors. I write books too. I write for adults, I write for kids. And I remember I had sent off my work to lots of publishers. And one editor was honest enough. I had reached out to her on LinkedIn. And she was honest enough to say to me, look, Louisa, yes, we ask for diverse stories. Because I said, you guys are asking for diverse stories. I've written a diverse story. What's going on? Well, but we want Canada-focused books. How do I tell a diverse story and focus it on Canada? I'm writing about what I know. and I'll show you samples of my books. So what I did, I decided, well, to go ahead and self-publish, because I just went, you know what? Let me put what I want to put out there. So I have Crowning Glory.
Okay.
So my children's series is called Africa is Not a Country series. And here I'm writing about African hair tradition.
Nice, very nice.
The goddess that was believed in Yoruba folklore to have been the first hairdresser. That's her with the comb and the golden mirror. And these are African hairstyles with
beautiful.
All of that, yes. And I was talking about the significance of hair, African hair. Back in the day in African cultures, you could tell the family a person belonged to just by looking at the person's hairstyle.
Okay.
That's what a lot of people in Edo State, where I'm from, you can still tell people from the royal family, like the chiefs, because they have a unique haircut. Here, this one is the African safari, an introduction to Africa's indigenous animals.
Okay.
A lot of people don't know that kangaroos and tigers are not indigenous to the African continent.
Absolutely.
And you talk of the creators. You know, people always put up the picture, and when I wanted to create, I was specific. I told the illustrator, give me a black man with locks and a black woman with locks, and with this earthen pots pouring into the air.
Okay.
As a sign of creation. So in terms of authenticity and telling stories, I realized that a lot of Black stories are not told by Black authors, which is very sad. But I think the reason why that happens is it is more difficult for Black authors to get published. And I don't know why that is. But if a white author told the same story, the chances of that white author getting published are higher.
Yeah, well, I mean, I can tell you why it is.
Mm-hmm.
We are going to tell the story from our perspective.
Yeah.
They will tell the story from their perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the perspective they want the story to be told from. And that's one of the challenges that we have as Black authors, is representing our stories. Even this story here, I got a lot of pushback from one of the reviewers who very clearly just didn't like the idea of questioning the Western notion of how human beings should interact with pets. Yeah, so what you did is what many of us are now doing, and that is, rather than trying to go through traditional publishing route, which is a filter.
Yeah.
So we bring our work to the traditional publishers, they filter it.
Yeah.
Is this ideologically Western enough? Is this white enough for us to go with it?
Mm-hmm.
If it is, they get through. And if it's not, they'll tell us, oh, it doesn't meet our criteria, or it's not well written enough, or there's no market for it. Fine. What we are doing now is publishing these independently, and there's a very rich and thriving community of independent publishers, Black publishers who are writing Black stories for Black audiences.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
so I applaud you. And
because I feel that, sometimes I had written a story about food, jollof rice. I don't know, have you tasted jollof rice?
Of course, yes.
Good. Well, as a Nigerian, we would say ours is the best. Ghanaians say theirs is the best. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I had written a children's book about jollof rice because my two characters. Let me show you this. These are my two characters. So I went ahead and did this. So I used them as the vehicle for telling my story. So I had written about jollof rice, how it came all the way from the Wall of Empire in Senegal, and how it went, when people were taken away to the Caribbean, to the Americas, is the origin for a lot of things, jambalaya, a lot of recipes.
Oh, wow.
Yes, a lot of recipes, because I did my research. I know research. And in the course of my research, I realized that when people were taken away from the motherland, they didn't go empty-handed.
Absolutely.
They left with herbs, all those things, recipes. And as they were sold into different parts of the Americas, the Caribbean, and so on, some of these recipes got tweaked because of the availability of spices. It's like, and this literary agent wrote back to me to say, "Hi, Louisa, I really love your story, but it's too heavy." And I'm wondering, it's too heavy. Is it because I brought in slavery? But that's the truth. So a lot of people are not comfortable with being uncomfortable. And I feel that one thing storytelling is and self-publishing is doing is we're heading in the direction, we're going to get to a point where people have no choice but to get comfortable with being uncomfortable in telling true stories. But the truth is, these things, your ancestors did these things. You can't change it, but you can do better, right? Yeah.
Yes.
So I feel that we need to get to that stage where we get comfortable with being uncomfortable, because this is the reality of things. What is the way forward? How can we make things better? But I think that challenge of getting Black voices published by mainstream publishers is one thing that I still don't understand, because I am telling my authentic story. And it's just like how you write a story and you have to say, you know, like when they tell you that when you speak two different languages, you get to experience life through different lenses.
Right.
How do you think that as Black authors, we can support each other in telling Black children's stories?
Yeah, so one thing we can do is to coalesce and form communities. Mm-hmm. And you and I are part of one of those communities together. There's Facebook groups. The one Facebook group that I think you and I are in is, what is it? African American Children's Books.
I'm in so many of those groups.
Illustrators, authors and illustrators for African American children, something like that.
Yeah.
But for finding those communal spaces. Mm-hmm. And the reason that's important is because in those spaces we share opportunities, and we also share insight. And so as independent publishers, there are many challenges. Many of us are doing this in addition to a regular 9-to-5 job. And so we're learning as we go. And you may spend 3 or 4 months learning how to do school visits. Okay. And I may spend 3 or 4 months learning how to, or what the best print-on-demand publisher is to work with. Mm-hmm. If you can share with me what you learned from school visits, and I can share with you what I learned from working with publishers, then both of us can double what we're able to do with putting in, less time on it. And so I have found that those communities are very rich. People are very open to sharing. And so I think it's a good community in that way. Another thing that we can do, and this goes not only for us as authors, but also our readers. Mm-hmm. It's one thing to write a book, and writing a book is a challenge. But sometimes people ask me, how hard is it? I say, writing it really, by comparison, is easy. The hard part is selling the book.
Yeah.
And we sell the books. Yes, we want to make money. We want to live comfortable and that sort of thing. But the main reason we need to sell our books is so that the books are sustainable. And so anytime in a capitalist society, you produce a product and there's no market for the product is going to die. Mm-hmm. And so all the time and energy you put into researching the origins of jollof rice so that we can learn from that. Mm-hmm. If you represent it in a book and people don't buy the book, then the knowledge is lost. Okay. There's a few things that we can do for each other to help ensure that our books are, that they have life. Mm-hmm. What I like about being an independent author is I've written 8 books. Okay. And 8 children's books. And some of those need to be redone, but let's just say 8. Mm-hmm. There's no way in the world I could write enough books to populate somebody's library. So they're gonna still be needing other authors. Yeah. So in that sense, Louise and I don't compete. We're actually working together.
Yeah.
So somebody can buy all of my books, all of your books, all of the books of 50 other authors, and they might then have a reasonable personal library, right?
Yes.
So when we refer each other, make recommendations for each other, that's helping to boost. We can do that by, if your distribution channel is Amazon, mm-hmm. I can read your book, I can go on to Amazon and write a review. Amazon rewards books that have reviews by displaying them more. Mm-hmm. So as readers, if we want to help Black authors, even if we don't buy, we can make recommendations, we can make reviews. When you post something on social media, we can share it. Mm-hmm. So you might write a book about, say how to do Black girls' hair. Okay. I don't have Black girls, I don't do Black girls' hair. That's okay. But I have friends and family who do. So mm-hmm. I can share that with my friends and family, say, hey, look, the sister came out with a book about how to do Black girls' hair. You might want to check it out. And those are very, that's low-hanging fruit. Those are very simple things that we as a community can do to help ensure that we have the type of information in the form of books that's important for us as a community.
Okay. So I want to go back to your book and how they solved the issue with this dog diva. They appealed to her conscience, basically, because I was wondering how these children were going to get rid of her, and with all the things they did, and then in the end she ended up leaving, and it just took me back to humanity and history, where you spoke about. So there, were you referring to dogs, or you were just touching on history? Yeah, well, because here where you said we have been jailed, taken away from our playmates and homes, now we return to torment you till you leave dogs alone.
Yeah, so when I first wrote this, before we had the illustrations or anything, I call them my Black Kids Read family, right? So, or the Black Kids Read Village. So I will sometimes go to those who subscribe to my email list, who have purchased in the past and who have children the age of my readership. And I say, look, I have a new book that I'm looking at. I want a few people to come together and we'll do a read, and I wanted to get your thoughts on it.
Okay.
And so we did that. And it was it's a handful of us. We met on Zoom and read through it. And this has been modified a little bit, but the core idea was there. And so what's happening in the text here, it's really showing a corollary between how the dogs are being treated versus how humans, we as Black Americans, have been treated historically. So the answer is yes, both, right?
Right.
So one of the parents commented that this actually is a good way to introduce this concept of slavery. These are themes that parents don't usually go into the kids' room when we say, hey, this morning we're going to talk about slavery, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But it is a topic that we do want to talk about, and we wanted to raise it. So here is an example. Why a child might ask, well, why do the dogs have chains? The chains represent those fetters we put on our animals to control them. You gave the example that when you moved to the city from the north to the south, mm-hmm. you were told to keep your dogs in cages.
Yes.
Now, I think it's kind of funny how we use terminology, right? So if you go into the store to buy a cage for your dog, they call it a crate. If you raise rabbits and you want to put the rabbit in a cage, they call it a hole. So we give them all these different names, but at the end of the day, it's a jail for the animal.
Yeah.
And I don't know any living thing that wants to be confined like that. You know, they don't. No living creature wants to be confined in that way. And so that's opening the door for us to talk about, okay, what is it like for these dogs? And here the dogs are actually expressing it. Now you get it from the dog's perspective, or the dog's point of view. They're taken away, and that's when the dog pound takes them away. They're chained. They're put in chains. And at the very end, the one dog, the story is called Demon Dog. Mm-hmm. Tells Dog Diva to set the slave dogs free, and it refers to the dogs as slave dogs, mm-hmm. as opposed to them, which are envisioned as free dogs.
Yeah.
So the answer is both, but really that is given there so to open the door to those type of discussions. One other thing I want to say here, Louise, to me, one of the beautiful things in a story, when you read a story to a child or read a story with a child, you read the story, and I give most of the authors I work other authors who I collaborate with as peers, I notice that we all do the same thing, given discussion questions, we give vocabulary, activities that you can do relating to the story.
Yeah.
And so there are some discussion questions, but the richness is that a child has been given 32 pages of something happening, and they can come back to you and ask any question that resonates with them. So some children may say, okay, well, why did the dogs have the chains on or the collar on? That was a discussion point for that child. Another child may ask what you asked earlier, well, why did they talk to the elders? That's a discussion point for that child. My son has asked me numerous times, can you show me those traps? How do you make those traps? Where do those traps come from? So we'll stop. Okay, well, let's look at the different ways, different type of traps and pitfalls that you can have, right? And so the beauty of it is that a story is rich enough that the reader is a self-directed learner, and you move into the direction of whatever your area of interest is, whatever the pressing question is that you have. Mm-hmm. And as parents reading to children, what I often say is, don't feel as though you have to have answers. What this story does is it helps to raise questions for your child, and you just be a learner with them and go and say, well, let's explore more about that, see what we can find out about it.
Okay. And another thing I noticed here, why was the Dingle Diva a woman and all the elders men? No other elders. No, I didn't see any women among the elders. Let me go back and take a look.
Yeah, why? Because there you didn't see accurately. There are.
Yeah, I just want to double check.
Yeah, there's 5 elders, 2 are women and 3 are men.
Let me see. Oh, okay. I was focused on I think my head, I was just focused on the 3 men, because I was wondering, why are all the elders men and then the only evil person is a woman? Why? Why? So so I noticed that you have, is it a foundation, Black Kids Read? What is it about?
So Black Kids Read is the name of my publishing company.
Okay. So
I publish the books under that business structure, Black Kids Read Press. It's an LLC. And so I have 2 things. On one hand, I do write and publish books. Mm-hmm. And on the other hand, or the second part of it is I also sell books. Okay. So if you go to the Black Kids Read bookstore, you'll find books that are published through Black Kids Read, but you'll also find books that others publish. So for example, and when you and I talk, this is something we may broach, but I could carry in my bookstore your books as well. Okay. When I do fairs and shows and that sort of thing, I take more than just the books that I write. I take books of other authors, and it gives parents and educators a chance to see a range of independently published books that they could have access to.
Okay.
I want to stress many of the stories that are presented by independent publishers, you are not going to find through the 5 big publishers. So Scholastic and Random House, they really are not taking the time to publish stories that are meaningful to us. We will, if you go into Barnes & Noble, you'll see a lot of traditionally published books, Black books on Black hair. One of the teachers I work with, she called them tragic stories.
Yeah, they're all watered down. They're watered down, yeah.
All these bad things that have happened to Black people. And so, but what you find in the independent publisher space is such a broader range, because each author is bringing to it, hey, this is something that has been important to me that I wanted to tell the world about. Okay. And these are Black people who are sharing the world from their perspective. And sometimes their children are writing some of these stories as well.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Then there was that, I remember the first time I reached out to you, was it last year? There was something you were doing, you were putting together where you were talking about putting children.
Oh, yes.
What was that? Talk about that project. Talk to us about that project. Because I want it to be on this podcast so that if anybody is listening, they can also learn from there. What is that project about? Because let me see. So
it's a video series where we have 10 authors who come together, and each author is taking one book, and that book's going to be produced into a video story time. Okay. So the book is professionally narrated, they're professionally edited, and we'll give these books to Black Education Station, which is it's like Netflix, but with content for Black people and for Black children in particular. Okay. And they will run the 10 episodes exclusively for a period of time. And then after that, each author will have their own video to share with others to promote their work. And so what's really nice about this is that as educators and as parents, you get to see the story. So you get to see the whole story, see what it's about, and then you can make a decision. Is this something that I want an actual physical copy in our home for my child? I think one of the beautiful things about children's books is that we don't lose anything by having you read the book in advance. Because children don't want to just read a book one time. When my son was younger, we read, one of the books we read a lot was, the Gruffalo? He loved reading the Gruffalo. I swear we read that book 50 to 100 times. So no child says to you, do you want to read such and such, a book they like? Oh no, I read that once, I don't need to read that again. They want to read it repeatedly. And so if you see a story and you like it and that your child likes it, buy the book. and then you can read it repeatedly. But the series is a video production of these books, which gives you and your child a chance to see it, to determine, is this something that resonates with us? And it's also a nice way to be exposed to a range of authors, independent authors, and the work that we're producing.
Okay.
So I'm really excited about that project. I'm sorry to interrupt you. Yeah. I'm excited about that project, and I would say we're about halfway finished. I'm hoping that we have the complete series by the end of March. If it's not the end of March, it definitely will be before the end of April. So that will be out soon.
But okay. So what do you hope to see for your books? Where would you like to see your books go? What would you like to see happen with your books?
Yeah, I want to see them used by children. Mm-hmm. So my goal is to make, there's a marketing expert who said that people don't buy your products because they don't know about it and they don't know you. And at the end of the day, what it comes down to, right? They don't know that the product even exists, and they don't. When he says they don't know you, it means there's not enough of a relationship, so to speak, a familiarity, comfort with you. And so my goal has been to help people, Black parents and educators, be aware that these books exist and have some familiarity with me and with my products to make a determination as to whether or not they want it. I'm not a salesperson the way I envision a salesperson to be traditionally, where they try to hound you until you submit. Mm-hmm. So that's not my approach. My approach is to say, hey, I just want you to know that this is available to you, and if you're interested, here's where you go to get it. And my sense is that people, when they're ready, and if they're interested and when they're ready, they'll come get it. But they've got to know it's there.
Okay.
And so the publishing company name, again, is Black Kids Read. Black Kids Read. And it's easy to find. If you do it in your search Black Kids Read, it'll pop up. Or you can type the website in directly. It's blackkidsread.org. All one word, blackkidsread.org. That'll take you directly to the website. If you do a search for my name, Jomo Mutegi, that's JOMOMUTEGI, it'll take you to either my research lab website, and if you go there, you can find a link to Black Kids Read, or it'll take you to Black Kids Read. Both will come up if you do that search.
Okay, are you on Instagram?
Yes, I'm on Instagram under Black Kids Read.
Okay, same thing. Okay, so that's quite easy. Well,
yes. I'm
coming to the end of your book now, and I like that you have discussion topics at the end of your book.
Yes.
Which I feel is great. I think for me, because my very first job was, I started out as an English teacher. Mm-hmm. So my book too, I have a teaching guide in it.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh yeah, I just love it because I just feel that it's not enough just to read a book and then you put it down. So I have the letter, dear readers, telling them a bit about myself. I have the map of the African continent. Then I have interesting things to know about Africa. Let me see. Interesting thing to know about African hair tradition. Mm-hmm. And word search, because when my niece took a look, she said, when I gave it to them, because I use my nieces and my nephews as my beta readers. And when she read it, she went, why is there no word search? We want word search. Yeah, okay. We want that in books. And then I felt the need to put a teaching guide. So what I did here was I put the word search in, then I added a teaching guide.
Okay.
Yeah, so there's a teaching guide. This one is the one with for the safari.
Okay.
Yes, just teach people about that. So when I saw these discussion topics you had at the back, I said, oh, this is very interesting. That is, most of the time, that's how you know. I know when I read books written by teachers, I go, okay.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not just enough to tell a story. You still need, that impact. You still need to teach people something and say, what have you learned by reading this? How have I made an impact in your life? Yeah. Yeah. So I don't know. I wanted to ask if you wanted to read your book to us, because I realized that when I read books, is different from when the author reads, because the author who wrote the book knows the tone.
Okay.
Yes, him or her. So please kindly read this book to us. Then
sure, I'd be happy to.
Yes.
And how do you want to do the images? Are you going to?
No, it's just fine. Just read it to us.
Yeah. Oh, don't worry about it. Okay.
Yes.
Sure.
If you have the book, you can hold it up if you want to, but you can just read it to us. That's fine.
I'm going to read off my computer.
Okay. Yeah. So just read it to us. That's fine.
Okay. Dog Diva danced and smirked and smiled. It really made her day to watch the pound, vicious and vile, take Deidre's dog away. "This just can't be," said Derek Dietz. "They're stealing all our dogs. Princess Petite, Patty and Pete, they even took Big Paws." So Derek, Dan, Deidre, and Drew met at the dogwood tree, devised a plan to tame the shrew who brought them so much grief. "Daphne should know," Daniel chimed in. "She'll get us what we need." Derek and Drew nodded and grinned. Deidre cried out, "Agreed." Daphne thought hard and Daphne thought long, pondering their next move. "Elders must know. We can't go wrong. They'll tell us what to do." The elders heard the daring five as they all shared the grief Dog Diva brought to Dingledorf Drive and why they sought relief. "She makes her dogs wear shirts and pants. They never run and play. They eat kibble out of her hands. They watch TV all day. Our happy dogs dash, dart, and dance. They frolic, fuss, and fight. They eat real meat out of the grass. They even howl at night." Deidre then spoke. "Babas, I think what we have tried to say is that we've tried to have our dogs live in a natural way." The eldest elder stopped and stood and eyed the daring five. "Daphne, my child, you have done good, and we support your fight." So Derek, Dan, Deidre, and Drew listened to Daphne's plan. They'd put more fear into the shrew than she could hardly stand. Daniel arranged electric ghosts. Diva would be aghast. Deidre and Drew went off to sow spirits of doggies past. Daphne helped Derek build some traps to fortify the yard. Where the remaining dogs were kept, the Babas all kept guard. Later that day, Peter came past, asking about our friends. Tires were slashed, tyrants were stashed. They won't come back again. Dog Diva watched TV that night, and she got quite a shock when every channel showed the blight that she brought to the block. A hairy horde hollered and howled through her computer screen. "Why do you treat canines so foul? And why are you so mean?" Diva's Diva lost her cool, and she made such a mess. Broke her TV and her PC. Then she laid down to rest. Rest was not hers, not on this night. She had an awful dream. 2 demon dogs, wasted and white, made a horrendous scream. One dog was broke, bloodied and bruised. The other dog wore chains. One of them spoke. "You are so confused. You don't even know our names." Dog Diva said, "You lived outside, out in the snow and rain. I called the pound. There's an upside. Now you'll have no more pain." Demon dog barked. "Self-righteous cur. That is how dogs are made. God made us free and gave us fur just for those wintry days. We have been jailed, taken away from our playmates and homes. Now we return to torment you till you leave dogs alone." Dog Diva sobbed, slobbered, and begged. "What do you want from me? Get away from Dingledorf Drive and set those slave dogs free." She packed a bag, hurried and rushed, and loosed the slave dog chains. Then she was gone in a blurred whoosh, and never seen again. The elders and the daring five stood at the dogwood tree and watched the dogs of Dingledorf Drive as happy as they could be.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. See the way you read it?
Thank you.
See the way you read it is very different. So I just want to say a very big thank you, Jomo, for, spending this time with me and chatting about your books.
Sure.
I just want to say a very big thank you.
And thank you for having me. I appreciate this platform and this
no.
form that you created.
Oh, no, you're most welcome.